Well, welcome, Linden. Thank you for sitting down with us for a visit for Treasures of Worthington. Let's start at the beginning. Can you tell me about your background?
Well, I was born here in Worthington. My father and mother lived on a farm about 1.5 miles, 2 miles south of Worthington, and that's where I grew up. I was one of the oldest child of a family of 4. I have a brother and 2 sisters. The brother is next in age to me, and then 2 younger sisters. I went to country school, rode horseback to a country school, about 1.75 miles from our farm. On good days, on bad weather days, we got driven. But there were about 5 of us that rode horseback to country school, and we would pick up kids on the way and drop them off on the way back. And so we actually rode horseback to a country school.
That's interesting. There's not many people around that can say that.
I did that we did that for first 7 grades, and in 8th grade, my father and my neighbors was the same grade as I was, and his father decided they would bring us into Worthington's public schools a year before 8th grade, because country school only ran through 8th grade, so
Right.
They were going to bring us in 7th grade, so we got a head start on the rest of the kids coming in. And the interesting story of this was that we came in and went to first hour class, and pretty soon we got taken out and taken down to the superintendent's office. We didn't know what was going on, and we got taken over to the Central Elementary where the school lunches was, and they fed us lunch, and about an hour after lunch they put us back in. Well, I found out later that we were not supposed to be in the school because we didn't own property in the district. And if you didn't own property in the district before 9th grade, you couldn't come in. So our fathers each bought a piece of ground in the city so we could get into Worthington
Really?
Public Schools a year earlier than we normally would have been able to.
That is crazy. Tell me about what you remember about. My mom went to country schools, and she has quite, a few stories. Tell me a little bit about going to country school.
Well, the country school we went to was called District 28, which was 3/4 of a mile south and about 1 mile west of where we lived. And it was a 1-room country school. It had a little corner, what they call the library, and 8th grades, and so the older kids would kind of help the younger kids. And there was 1 teacher, and I think the numbers varied probably from 10 to 15 kids or so that I can remember.
Right.
And several of them would walk to school for maybe 1 mile, 1.5 miles. I think it served an area about 3 miles around, 2.5 to 3 miles around. And one of the interesting things was there was another country school called District 80, which was about 3 or 4 miles west of us, and every spring we would have a field day with District 80.
Oh, okay.
So this was how we played softball and other games and so on. But that was country school at that time, and a spring field day.
So then you came into Worthington before your 9th grade year, your 8th grade year. So that had to have been a huge change. Tell me about that.
Well, it was the high school at that time was where Memorial Auditorium is now, and,
Right.
and most of the rest of it had been taken down. But there was one wing of was also for the junior college.
Oh, yeah, that's
And
right.
then there was a little white building out in the back called the Annex, which was kind of the junior college, what they called it at that time, the junior college office. So we and the ag department was kind of down on that area of the school.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of the northwest part was the junior college. They had a few classrooms down there. But it was a 2-story, building and classrooms on all the stories, and then down into toward one end of it was the band room down in the basement.
Okay.
Basically, under where Memorial Auditorium is
Right,
right now,
was the
that
band
was
room.
the old band room.
Okay. What did you participate in high school? What were you involved in?
Well, but the only thing that I was involved in was FFA, which at that time was called Future Farmers of America. The name was changed to FFA later. And I did play a little bit of intramural basketball, and one year I did play on the basketball team.
You did. You played on the high school basketball team.
Well, I think I got into one game and made one free throw and missed one free throw, and that was the end of my basketball, because at the year I played basketball, then the next year we had one less hired man, so I went home and did chores after that.
So farm life was your life.
It was all I had. Yes, it was. And the FFA and the FFA, I was fortunate to be on the judging team and on the parliamentary procedure team, and so. But those were the only things that I really did in high school, because the farm needed some help too.
Right. You had a lot of responsibilities at home as well. So talk about what happened after high school.
Well, then this may be interesting. After high school, I graduated in 1958. The existing high school right here, where this building is, was built on the old fairgrounds.
Right.
And so basically I could say that I showed 4-H pigs right where this high school building sits. And it was built about, I think they occupied it in January 1st, I think, of 59, so, or 60, I don't remember, but it was one of the last classes to graduate from the old high school before the new high school was built. And 4-H was also one of the things I did but that was not a high school course, but 4-H was the other thing that I did most of. After graduation, I was one of the first, if not the first, boy to go to the University of Minnesota to get a 4-year degree. There was the ag school that a lot of farm boys went to and came back to the farm, but if I'm correct, I was one of the first, if not the first, to go get a 4-year degree and come back to the farm.
And your degree was in agriculture, or?
It was, yes, I majored in animal science and minored in plant industry and ag economics.
Awesome.
And I graduated in 10 quarters. Took
Wow.
extra credits and so on, and I graduated from the university in December of 58. Graduated from high school in 55, I might have said 58, but I graduated from high school in 55 and the University of Minnesota in December of 58, and came back to farm. And in January of 59, 2 weeks later, after I graduated, my father was elected to the Minnesota Senate and went to the Senate. So I tell people I learned more the first 6 months after I graduated than I did all the 10 quarters I was in college, because I had never run a corn planter before. I had never done a lot of things on the farm, and so I had to learn pretty fast what was going on in the farm.
Practical work, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about your father and that, his time in the Senate.
Well, my father was elected to the Senate in 1958 and went and served 16 years starting in January of 59. I don't remember a lot of what he did because I was busy on the
You're
farm.
right.
Yes.
So did he instill, I know that you later ran for school board and that was a big part of your life. Is that kind of what inspired you to get involved in that kind of thing?
No, I did a lot of other things before I came to run for the school board.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, a number of things that I always was involved in revolved around 3 things. It revolved around the church, it involved around education, and it revolved around the swine industry.
Okay.
And so I was did a lot of work with the swine industry in the Nobles County Pork Producers Association. I was on that for a number of years, and I wound up at the Minnesota Pork Producers Board of Directors, and after that I was on the National Pork Board, the original National Pork Board. You've heard of pork, the other white meat?
That's correct.
That
Yes,
was
I
one
have.
of the first things. I was on the board when that was adopted.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time on the National Pork Board and a number of committees, task forces, and for both the National Pork Board and the National Pork Producers Council. And I also did a lot of work with the church. I had served on a candidacy committee for church for over 40 years, and I've served on the Luther Seminary Board of Directors for a number of years, and did a number of other things for the Lutheran Church, both on a local and national level, state and national level. And the third one was education. When I graduated from the university, and later I had been on some advisory councils for the university, and I was on the board of directors for the Al Lehman Chair of Swine Health for several years. So those were the three areas in which I served: the church, the pork industry, and education. As far as school board, I was not elected to the school board the first time I ran, and then I didn't run for a number of years, and when I kind of retired from farming, then I ran for school board and was elected and served 16 years on the Worthington School Board.
Talk about that a little bit. You know, we're standing in, like you said, where you showed your 4-H animals, and this is a new addition here that was built. I'm not exactly sure on the dates, but let's talk about the things that you worked on and did while involved in the school board.
Well, I think the biggest thing that we did was we realized that given the demographics and the population, we needed more school buildings. So a lot of time was spent on trying to get a building bond referendum passed to build this, and we went through 3 different times in order to get it passed. It was somewhat frustrating that people didn't understand the need for that, and secondly, that they thought that it could be done cheaper and so on. And in retrospect, we look back that if we had been able to build the high school out on where the middle school is now, it would have been a whole lot cheaper and we'd have been a lot farther ahead. But the voters decided not to, and so we had to live with that, and we came up with other plans in order to get an acceptable building for the number of students that the area had.
And I know you did a lot of work on the state level as well.
Well, I also served on the Minnesota School Board Associations on the board of directors for I don't know, 5 or 6 years. Yes.
What do you think? I know you still follow local politics and things like that. What do you think are the big challenges that you had and what we're facing here in education?
Well, the big thing always has been funding. How do you fund things? I think in later years now, maybe a little more after I got off the school board, a number of things, not so much in Worthington, but on a state and national level, is how we're going to teach and what we're going to teach the students. There have been several attempts to change curriculum and to ban certain books and a number of things like that. I think makes serving on a local school board more difficult if you're under the gun to do some of these things, which we were not, did
Right.
not have those problems when I was on the school board.
You had talked about being the first to get a 4-year degree and from the University of Minnesota in agriculture. Why do you think education was, somebody must have stressed the importance of that. Where did that come from?
Well, I think that was kind of what was the expectations of my parents that were, all four of us children had got a college education. And I think that is interesting because my father only graduated from high school.
Right.
And my mother only ever graduated from 8th grade.
Which was quite common back then.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, quite common back then. And I say I was the first one to get a 4-year degree and come back to farm.
Right.
Most kids, particularly boys, and it was at that time it was only boys that came back to farm. They went to the ag school, which ran in the wintertime after harvest and
Sure.
before planting. So I got the 4-year degree and came back to farm. A lot of the other farm boys, if they got a 4-year degree, they did not come back to farm. A few of them did a little later
Right.
afterwards, but a number of them would go into veterinary medicine
Sure.
or some other agronomy degrees, but I came back to farm.
How do you think that education and being away from home and all that helped you when you came back to do work on the farm?
I think more than anything, it gave you the experience of hearing and getting to know other people. And I always felt that a lot of the people that I met in college, in particular some of the staff and so on, would go back to them for information in other years. So it was more becoming aware of things that were different, that were done differently, and how to find ideas and put them into place, and learn how to evaluate ideas and so on, like that, more than anything. It was more about ideas and resources and so on that you probably would not be aware of unless you were in that environment for a period of time.
Right. So you give you a more well-rounded look at things.
Yes.
So let's talk about in the time that you were in high school and in the 50s and in college, and you talked about the changes in education. What are the big changes in society and in life that you've seen?
Well, there's so many different areas that we could talk about there.
Sure.
Let's give me the example of when I was a young boy, 5, 6, 7 years old. My father planted corn with a team of horses. And he would go out at the break of dawn with a team of horses and plant with a 2-row planter. And he could plant about 1.5 acres an hour. On a good day, he could plant 20 acres a day. He would come in at noon, have some lunch, change the team of horses, and go back out and plant till dusk.
That's work.
Now today, modern planters can plant 40 acres an hour. So
Wow.
you go from planting 20 acres a day to planting 40 acres an hour
Right.
in a matter of a lifespan. Other things that I can remember back when the average corn yield was like 50 bushels an acre. That was great.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're talking 200 bushels an acre. So a 4-fold increase in the number of bushels of acre that corn was growing. I came through the period of time when fertilizer first was used on corn. Was put in little boxes on the corn planter. We had a 4-row corn planter at that time and pulled by a tractor, but they went into the boxes, 96-pound bags of fertilizer dumped in by hand, paper bags are ripped open and dribbled in the row, made quite a bit of difference. And now we put on fertilizer with big rigs, and it's been quite a change. So the machinery, it would be one thing.
Right.
Take the swine industry would be another one. Back when I was growing up, hogs were farrowed and weaned at 8 weeks of age. And if you got 8 pigs per litter, that was great. It was more like 6 or 7.
Right.
And over time, farrow-in crates were invented and being started used, and modern breeding methods were put in place. So now, rather than weaning pigs at 8 weeks and having 2 litters a year, sows will farrow 2 and a little over 2 times a year, and they will wean 10 to 11 pigs per litter. So that has been a huge change. One of the changes that I was a part of in college a little bit was pigs always had iron deficiency anemia when they were small. So in order to combat that, when I was growing up, we would go out even in the wintertime and knock some plowed ground loose, because ground soil, black dirt, is a pretty good source of iron.
Right.
And we would put this in for the little pigs to eat. Later, it started that you could use iron sulfate and swab it on the sow's udder. So we swabbed sow's udders with iron sulfate to get the pigs would suckle, and then they would get the iron sulfate, and so they would have.
Interesting.
The pigs would not get an iron deficiency anemia. Well, when I was in college, Dr. H.C.H. Kernkamp started using iron dextran, injectable iron dextran in baby pigs to do this. And so one of my jobs in college, and I did have a couple of jobs in college, was to wash the bottles in which the blood was drawn from these pigs. And after they run the hemoglobin tests on them and everything, so I kind of say I had a little part of that. Well, the upside of that was iron deficiency anemia is now treated 100% by injectable iron dextran. So that came about in about 1957, 1958 and on, and there's been some changes in the formulation of it, but it's still the way iron deficiency anemia is treated in baby pigs, is through injection. And so it was kind of interesting, and a friend of mine was a grad student who did quite a bit of work on that, and I even got to run a hand crank calculators. They were hand crank calculators to run the data back at the time that was done. Well, the upside of this was iron deficiency anemia is best combated by swabbing sow's udder with iron sulfate, but it's a whole lot easier, faster, and cheaper to do it by injectable than it was to do it with swabbing sow's udder every day.
Right. That's interesting. Let's talk about a little bit about, did you stress education with your own children? Can you talk about your family a little bit?
Well, all of our 4 children went to college. One of them went to Augustana University. One of them went to the University of Minnesota. One of them went to South Dakota State. They all have their 4 degrees. But yes, I think they just understood that education was very important. And one of the helpful things is that my father and mother set up trusts so that much of their 4-year education was paid for out of their trust.
That's a lot of foresight on your folks' part.
And right now the price of education has gotten so high that unless somebody wants to go into a huge amount of debt, it is very, very costly, and it will affect what they can do in future lives, because they have all this debt and interest to pay on their school debt. we were very fortunate and were able to get our 3 children through 4-year degrees with, they didn't have to worry about having debt afterwards to pay for.
Right, and that's a huge thing. Let's talk about the, like I said, I know you're still on top of things that are happening here in District 518 and throughout the state. What do you see as some of the challenges or the future in education?
Well, one of the things I think we don't realize in education, we're trying to teach children to solve problems that are not even existing today. So how do we build in the into the curriculum how and things that are important in the workplace of the 21st century skills of collaboration and excuse me, I forget all but collaboration and but then there's skills that we use every day: communication, collaboration, and something else. We got to build those into the curriculum, because those are things that you can't teach afterwards. They need to be taught as a part of what we do growing up.
Right.
I think other things that are challenges in education are coming now from the outside, that people want to limit and to tailor what young people in school can learn. And I mentioned earlier the banning of books and the forming of curriculum. When we see some people on a national level and a state level banning books and actually taking the directors of certain ones and replacing them with people that think like they do, I think that is harmful. Education should be about broadening our horizons, not narrowing them down. Should be about broadening perspectives and getting perspectives from all sides, not narrowing them down to a certain political idealistic mindset. And that is, to me, is quite concerning, particularly when it begins to happen on a national level.
In society or in your lifetime, what's been the biggest surprise that you've had in an event, whether it's a historical event, or can you speak to anything like that? Biggest change, anything that's,
Well, it's not maybe so much the biggest change, but we've become aware of how different societies and different countries treat the people. I think when we see civil wars in Rwanda and Sudan, and now we have the war in Ukraine and other places, that we live in a society which we have been extremely blessed that we have not had a war within our country, and how the events outside of our country are affecting events within our country. I think, we look at things like immigration, and we want to stop immigration at our border, and it's the only thing we looked about is how immigration affects us personally here in the United States. Well, immigration is a worldwide problem. It's not just something for the United States. We have the immigration from the Ukraine, the number of people that try to get out of the Ukraine, from Sudan, people from Iran and other places. We need to realize that problems that we have an international scope, not just a scope about our country or our state or our school district. Things have a much wider scope. We have too many people that know this much about something this big, and we need people that have the ability to grasp the whole picture and not just a little bit of something that is so big.
We've seen in our own community here, and certainly in your lifetime, and even in my time here, 30 years, a change in the demographic of Worthington. Can you talk about that a little bit and the challenges that we faced in this community and school district?
Yes, when I graduated from high school in 1955, there were no colors other than white. There were no ethnic groups other than basically white, Anglo-Saxon American, right, Protestants. Just to give you a perspective, it was a big deal. If a Lutheran boy married a Catholic girl, that was a big deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now it's nothing.
Right.
So the building of at the time, the armor plant, the pork processing plant out on the northeast side of Worthington was what began to bring other ethnic groups to Worthington. It was not met with a lot of favor by a number of people, and I still find people with a lot of racist attitudes about the people that are in the United States, and particularly in Worthington. I could give you one example. When we were we were running the bond referendum to build a new school, and we were out at the fairgrounds and explaining to people why we needed it because of the number of students and so on. And one person came up to me and he said, he said, if we wouldn't have these people, we wouldn't have to build these new schools. We should just build a fence around Worthington and keep them out. And that's actually what she said. So that kind of is still around with some people, and you still see minor, not so much overt as it was years ago, but there is still an element of why should we have to educate these kids? Well, they have their right to education just as much as I had my right to education too.
That's right. Well, it's an ongoing problem and something that, like you said, you've seen in your lifetime. On that note, is there anything that you've learned that you'd like to pass along in your lifetime, your time here on Earth? What things that you have found to be helpful, or can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I've always been willing to talk to people that do not look or think like I do. And when I tried to go into discussions and talks with people with this in mind, I will speak with the idea that I will be heard. I will listen with the idea that I may be changed. And I think too often we have people that go in with the attitude of my mind's made up, don't try and confuse me with the facts. But unless we have the ability and the willingness to listen to others who differ from us and to hear what they say and to possibly change our mind, I think this is some of what is happening in education today. We don't want to have people to explore ideas other than what they think is right, the wokeness. And I think people sometimes use woke in the wrong words. To me, woke means I heard something that I didn't know before and it changed me. I heard something about slavery that I didn't know when I graduated from high school, and it's changed what I think about it now. I heard something about a given ethnic population. I didn't know about it, and it's changed the way I look at people now. I didn't know this about that, and now I understand it, and it makes a difference to me. I think too often we have people that say, that happens in the past that has no relevance today. But I think unless we understand the past, we are bound to probably do it over again.
That is great advice. Thank you so much, Linden, for sitting down with us.
It's my pleasure.